What if the modern city of London began almost 2,000 years ago as a small settlement beside a river? Today, millions of people live and work in London, but its story began with Romans, traders, soldiers, and the River Thames. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. When you walk through London today, you see modern buildings, underground trains, busy streets, famous landmarks, and people from almost every part of the world. But underneath this modern city is a much older story, a story that goes back nearly 2,000 years. The River Thames played a major role in London's beginning. The river provided water, transportation, and an excellent route for trade. It was deep enough for ships, and its location made it useful for connecting different parts of Britain with the wider Roman world. When the Romans invaded Britain in AD 43, they recognized the importance of the Thames and the surrounding area. A settlement developed near the river and became known as Londinium. By the 1st century AD, it had grown into an important commercial and administrative center of Roman Britain, London City Hall. Imagine London almost 2,000 years ago. There were no red buses, no skyscrapers, no underground, no modern bridges crossing the river. Instead, there were Roman roads, wooden buildings, markets, warehouses, workshops, soldiers, merchants, and ships. The river was full of activity. Ships arrived carrying goods from different parts of the Roman Empire. Olive oil, wine, pottery, glass, food, other valuable products. Roman London became a busy center of commerce. Archaeological evidence shows that its waterfront developed substantially during the first few centuries, with wharves, warehouses, and sophisticated dock structures along the Thames, historic England. One of the most important developments was a bridge across the Thames. The bridge connected the northern and southern sides of the river and made movement and trade much easier. As more people arrived, Londinium continued to expand. There were public buildings, religious sites, markets, and even an amphitheater. The city became increasingly sophisticated for its time, but life in Roman London was not easy for everyone. Society was divided into different groups. There were wealthy merchants and administrators. There were soldiers. There were craftspeople and shopkeepers. There were workers and enslaved people. Everyone had a different place in Roman society. And like many great cities throughout history, London's growth was connected to trade. People came because there was opportunity. Goods came because there was demand. And the river connected London to the outside world. Eventually, Roman London was surrounded by defensive walls. Parts of the old Roman settlement later became the foundation of what is now known as the City of London, London City Hall. But Roman control did not last forever. By the early 5th century, Roman administration in Britain was withdrawn. The Roman world that had shaped Londinium was changing. The city entered a new and uncertain period. For a while, London became smaller and less urban. But the story of the city was far from over. New people would arrive. New settlements would appear. New rulers would fight for control. And slowly, a different London would begin to emerge. The Roman city had disappeared in many ways, but its location remained important. The Thames was still there, the roads were still there, and the strategic position of London had not changed. The next chapter of London's story would begin with the Anglo-Saxons and the rebuilding of urban life. Chapter 2: Anglo-Saxon London and the Norman Conquest. After Roman rule ended in Britain, Londinium slowly lost much of its importance. The streets that had once been busy with Roman merchants became quieter. Buildings were abandoned. Trade declined. For several centuries, the area inside the old Roman city was not the center of urban life that it had once been. But London did not disappear completely. A new chapter was beginning. During the Anglo-Saxon period, a settlement known as Londonwick developed west of the old Roman city, around what is now the Covent Garden and Strand area. By the 7th and 8th centuries, it had become an important trading settlement. Merchants arrived from different parts of Europe. They brought goods to sell. Others came to buy. Craftspeople produced pottery, metal objects, jewelry, clothing, and other everyday products. The River Thames remained one of London's greatest advantages. Ships could travel along the river, bringing goods and connecting the settlement with other parts of Britain and Europe. But this period was also dangerous. Viking attacks became a serious threat. London and other settlements along the English coast and rivers faced repeated attacks from Scandinavian raiders. Eventually, the area around London became part of the struggle between Anglo-Saxon rulers and Viking forces. King Alfred the Great played an important role in this period. After defeating the Viking army led by Guthrum, Alfred took control of London around 886 and restored the fortified settlement inside the old Roman walls. This was an important turning point. London once again became a major center. The old Roman walls provided protection, the river supported trade, and the city's location made it strategically valuable. Over the following centuries, London continued to grow. Then came one of the most famous events in English history. In 1066, King Edward the Confessor died without leaving a direct heir. Several men claimed the English throne. The most powerful contenders included Harold Godwinson, William, Duke of Normandy, and others. Harold became king, but William invaded England from Normandy. His army defeated Harold at the Battle of Hastings in October 1066. William then began taking control of England. London was extremely important because whoever controlled London had a major advantage in controlling the country. William approached the city. Rather than destroying London completely, he established control and began strengthening his position. One of the most famous symbols of Norman power was built soon afterward. The Tower of London began as a massive Norman fortress constructed under William the Conqueror. The White Tower, begun in the 1070s, became one of the most recognizable buildings in London's history. The fortress served many purposes. It protected the city, it demonstrated royal power, and it provided a secure residence for the king. London continued developing under Norman rule. New churches were built, trade expanded, the population increased. The city became increasingly important to England's political and economic life. But medieval London was not a comfortable place for everyone. The streets were narrow. Buildings were often made from timber. Sanitation was poor. Fire was a constant danger. Yet the city continued to attract people because it offered something powerful: opportunity. Merchants could make money. Craftspeople could find customers. Workers could find employment. And political power attracted important people. Over time, London became one of the most important cities in medieval England. Its ancient Roman foundations, Anglo-Saxon trading traditions, and Norman fortifications all became part of the city's identity. But London's greatest transformation was still ahead. As the medieval period continued, its population grew, its markets expanded, and its government became more organized. The city would eventually become the political and commercial heart of England, and the next chapter would take us into medieval London, a city of kings, merchants, crowded streets, magnificent churches, deadly diseases, and dramatic change. Chapter 3: Medieval London: Growth, Plague, and Survival. By the beginning of the medieval period, London had become one of the most important cities in England. Its location beside the River Thames continued to bring merchants, travelers, and workers. Markets became busier, streets became more crowded, and the city continued expanding beyond its old Roman foundations. London was becoming a place where people could build businesses, find work, and become wealthy. But medieval London was also a difficult and dangerous place to live. The streets were narrow and often dirty. Waste was a serious problem. Many people lived close together. Buildings were often made from wood, which made fires extremely dangerous. Yet, despite these problems, London continued to grow. The city's merchants became increasingly powerful. Trade connected London with other parts of England and with Europe. Wool was particularly important to England's medieval economy, and London became an important center for trade and finance. The city's markets were filled with different products: food, clothing, leather, metal goods, spices, wine, and many other items brought from distant places. The Thames was essential to this growing economy. Ships could bring goods directly into the city, while smaller boats moved products along the river. London's importance also grew politically. Kings visited the city. Government officials worked there. Important decisions were made there, and the city's growing wealth gave its leaders greater influence. But prosperity came with serious problems. London's population was increasing faster than its infrastructure could handle. Clean water was limited. Waste disposal was difficult. Diseases could spread quickly. Then, in the 14th century, Europe faced one of the most devastating disasters in its history. The Black Death reached England in 1348. London was hit particularly hard. The disease spread rapidly through crowded communities. People became sick with terrifying speed. Families lost loved ones. Businesses closed. Workers disappeared. The population of London fell dramatically. The exact number of deaths is uncertain, but historians agree that the plague caused enormous loss of life across London and England. Imagine living in the city during that time. One day, your neighbor might be working normally. A few days later, they could be seriously ill. There was no modern medicine capable of stopping the disease. People didn't understand its true cause. Fear spread alongside the illness. Yet London survived. The city slowly recovered. People returned. Markets reopened. Businesses began operating again, and the population gradually started growing. The plague had changed London permanently. It changed the economy. It changed the workforce. It changed people's attitudes toward life and death. But the city's story continued. London also experienced political conflict during the medieval period. In 1381, The peasants' revolt reached London. Thousands of rebels entered the city. They were angry about taxes, social inequality, and the conditions faced by ordinary people. The rebels attacked important buildings and demanded changes. For a short time, London became extremely dangerous. King Richard II eventually met the rebels and promised reforms, but the revolt was eventually suppressed. The events demonstrated something important. London was not simply a city of kings and wealthy merchants. It was also home to thousands of ordinary workers whose lives were deeply affected by political decisions. Despite wars, disease, poverty, and political unrest, London continued to grow. Its churches became more impressive. Its markets became more organized. Its merchants became more influential. And its position on the Thames continued to make it one of the most important cities in England. By the end of the medieval period, London was ready for another major transformation. The world around it was changing. Exploration was expanding. Printing was spreading. New ideas were challenging old traditions, and England was entering a dramatic new age. London would soon experience religious conflict, royal power, devastating fires, scientific progress, and enormous cultural change. The medieval city was about to become something much closer to the London we recognize today. Chapter 4: Tudor London, the Great Fire, and a City Reborn. As the medieval period came to an end, London entered a remarkable new age. The city was already important, but during the Tudor period, its population, wealth, and influence grew rapidly. Kings and queens became powerful figures in London's daily life. One of the most famous Tudor monarchs was Henry VIII. During his reign, England separated from the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, and London became deeply affected by the religious changes. Churches and monasteries were transformed. Religious buildings were closed or given new purposes. Property changed hands, and the city became a place where political and religious decisions could have enormous consequences. But London was not only a political center, it was also becoming a center of culture and entertainment. Theater became increasingly popular. People gathered to watch performances, and London's theaters attracted audiences from different social backgrounds. The most famous playwright associated with this period was William Shakespeare. His plays were performed in London, and the city became an important part of England's growing theatrical culture. At the same time, London continued to expand. More people arrived looking for work. More businesses opened. More goods moved through the city's markets and river ports, but rapid growth created serious problems. The streets became increasingly crowded. Sanitation remained poor. Disease was still a major threat, and fire remained one of the city's greatest dangers. Most importantly, many buildings were still constructed from timber. Then, in 1665, London experienced another devastating disaster. The Great Plague struck the city. Thousands of people died. Fear spread through the streets. Some families left London to escape the disease. Others had nowhere to go. The city suffered enormous loss. But only 1 year later, London faced another catastrophe. In September 1666, a fire began in a bakery on Pudding Lane. The fire spread quickly. London's wooden buildings were packed closely together. Strong winds helped the flames move from street to street. For several days, much of the city burned. Thousands of homes were destroyed. Many churches were destroyed. Important buildings disappeared. A large part of the medieval city of London was left in ruins. But from this destruction came an opportunity to rebuild. The rebuilding of London became one of the most important chapters in the city's history. One of the major figures involved was Christopher Wren. He helped design and rebuild many important buildings, including the new St. Paul's Cathedral. The new London that emerged from the ruins was different. Buildings increasingly used brick and stone. Streets and structures were rebuilt. The city began developing a more organized appearance. The Great Fire had been devastating, but it also changed the physical character of London. London continued growing throughout the late 17th and 18th centuries. Trade expanded. The city's financial importance increased. Merchants became wealthier. Ships carried goods across the world. London's connection to global trade became stronger. Coffee houses became popular meeting places. People gathered to discuss politics, business, science, literature, and news. These places helped create a culture of information and debate. London was becoming more than a national capital. It was becoming a global city. But this growth came with contradictions. Wealth increased for some people, while poverty remained severe for others. The city became richer, but overcrowded neighborhoods were often unhealthy. Luxury existed alongside extreme poverty. The streets were filled with merchants, workers, aristocrats, sailors, criminals, artists, and immigrants. London was becoming a city of enormous contrasts. And then something even bigger was about to happen. The Industrial Revolution began transforming Britain. Factories appeared. New machines changed production. Railways changed transportation. People moved from the countryside towards cities in search of work, and London began growing at a speed never seen before. The small Roman settlement beside the Thames had become a huge and increasingly complex capital. But the greatest transformation was still ahead. The 19th century would turn London into one of the largest and most influential cities on Earth. Chapter 5: Victorian London and the Birth of the Modern City. The fire of 1666 had changed London, but the greatest transformation was still ahead. By the beginning of the 19th century, London was growing at an extraordinary speed. Factories were expanding. Trade was increasing. Railways were connecting different parts of Britain. And thousands of people were moving toward the capital in search of work. London was becoming one of the largest cities in the world. Much of this transformation happened during the reign of Queen Victoria, from 1837 to 1901. This period became known as the Victorian era. For London, it was an age of enormous growth, invention, wealth, and change. But it was also an age of serious poverty and inequality. The city attracted people from across Britain and from many other countries. New neighborhoods appeared. Roads expanded. Railway stations were built. Factories and warehouses grew. And the River Thames became one of the busiest waterways in the world. In 1863, another revolutionary development arrived. The London Underground opened its first section, connecting Paddington with Farringdon. It was the world's first underground railway. At first, the trains were powered by steam. Imagine traveling beneath London, while the city above was filled with horses, carriages, workers, and pedestrians. The underground completely changed how people could move around the growing capital. People could live farther from their workplaces. Businesses could expand. Different parts of London became more connected. But Victorian London had a darker side. Many poor families lived in overcrowded areas. Some homes had terrible sanitation. Clean water was not always available. Disease could spread quickly. One of the biggest problems was cholera. People did not initially understand how the disease was spreading. Eventually, investigations into London's water and sanitation helped change public understanding. The work of physician John Snow during the 1854 cholera outbreak became an important moment in the history of public health. London gradually began improving its sewage and drainage systems. The construction of major sewers during the 19th century helped transform public health in the capital. Another important development was the creation of new public spaces and landmarks. London's streets became wider and more organized. Parks provided places for people to escape the crowded city. Major buildings and institutions were constructed. The Houses of Parliament were rebuilt in the 19th century. The clock tower that became famous for its great bell and clock was completed as part of the Palace of Westminster. London's museums, theaters, libraries, and cultural institutions also expanded. The city was becoming a center of science, education, literature, art, and politics. But London's population continued increasing. By the end of the 19th century, Greater London had become a vast urban area. Horse-drawn buses filled the roads. Cabs carried passengers through busy streets. Railways brought thousands of people into the city. Electric lighting began changing London after dark, and new technologies were transforming everyday life. Yet not everyone benefited equally from London's prosperity. The rich could live in large houses and enjoy comfortable lives. Poor workers often lived in cramped conditions and worked long hours. Children were sometimes forced to work. Charitable organizations and social reformers began campaigning to improve living and working conditions. The Victorian period, therefore, created two very different images of London. One was a city of wealth, invention, grand buildings, and global trade. The other was a city of poverty, overcrowding, pollution, and hardship. Both were real, and together, they created the London we recognize today. By the beginning of the 20th century, London had become a truly global capital. Its financial institutions influenced international trade. Its ports connected Britain with countries across the world. Its railways connected millions of people. Its culture influenced literature, music, theater, fashion, and politics. But the 20th century would bring challenges that Victorian London could never have imagined. Two world wars would threaten the city. Modern technology would transform daily life, and London would eventually become one of the most multicultural cities on earth. From a Roman settlement beside the Thames to a global metropolis, London's journey was entering its modern chapter, and the city was about to face its greatest tests yet.